Going on, everybody? Hope you're all doing well. Let me turn the chat on. Let's get this party started. Sorry about being late. What's up, P4? Oh, you said this before me about getting the party started. Listen, you when you seen it, I said let's get this party started, and then the chat came up. It's all screen recorded, so that's a fact. It's funny how that works. But good to see you guys. I'm glad you could join. What an interesting live stream this will be. I think some stuff that it is, after all, October 4th. And I absolutely love this article. This is unrelated, but it's related. This is the type of shenanigans that the mainstream media thinks is going to work anymore. They're desperate and their backs up against the wall. They don't know where to turn. They don't all their usual tactics are no longer valid. They don't work anymore. Yes, of course, there's always going to be this just trying to find the right words without using swear words or inappropriate language. There's always going to be a section of society that is just so damn indoctrinated, that will always be bootlickers, that will always do whatever they can to appease the man, right? Whoever their boss is, whoever it is that has a little bit more power than they do, they're going to suck up to them in every which way possible. And that means going against their principles, their integrity, their family, whatever the case may be. That population is getting smaller and smaller. And there's a sense of panic, I feel, among these people that are buying billion-dollar bunkers underground. It seems like it's not going as planned 100%. And I think the internet has backfired on them tremendously. Now, anybody who's done their research into the internet with like CERN essentially and why it was created, why it was created was to send packages of information. But not long after that, the Department of Defense realized how useful that could be, just like the media, right? With their movies, their music, the commercial, anything that they can and do use to try to get your brain to think in a way that it might not have had you not seen or heard whatever it is that they're so desperate for you to hear. That's also not necessarily a good thing, because anybody knows, firsthand experience, there was a dog getting into my garbage when I was like 12 years old, and it was a German Shepherd, and I thought I could just grab this stick that was nearby and start yelling and chase it. It worked fine. The dog ran and he got out of the garbage and started running to the road, and I kept chasing it thinking it would just keep running until it got to the road, and it was like, I'm not crossing this shit. And then it turned back on me and started chasing me, so the tables completely turned, and then I was running with the stick away from the dog. Had my sister not been there, watched the whole thing apparently, and luckily grabbed the broom and came out, and now two people with sticks. I guess the dog was like, all right, but I probably would have been maimed by that German Shepherd. So the point is, you can do enough to a certain point to get people scared and running, but when their back's completely to the wall and they have no other choice, what do they have to lose, right? That was like the dog right there. It's like, well, I can cross this. There's traffic. I may get hit, or this sizing me up. I will probably weigh about the same. What do I got to lose? So he turned back on me, and that's something that these people have nukes. Well, for people that believe them. And if not, I mean, all other capabilities. It doesn't matter if you believe a nuke exists or not. Do you think that's necessary? Like, they absolutely need that with this technology anyway? Like, they can demolish us, no problem. So that's the thing we need to be weary of and careful of, nonetheless. Like, it's just not like a free for all. Like, yay, we're winning. You're like, everything should be calculated just like everything is for them, and very cautious when approaching these things. But to me, it is clear that their game isn't working. People are catching on. People are catching on to even like the Russell Brands and the Tucker Carlsons, which is huge. Like, that's the second layer. They haven't, from my knowledge, they haven't really been working on a third. It's the mainstream media, and then they got, their little gatekeepers, the people that are there to catch the ones that slip through. But beyond that, maybe a few, but good luck. And when people start realizing that, that's when the ball will be in our court. Not quite, but we're almost getting there. Let me just go through this article. I may have to read the whole thing. I normally don't do this, but this is such a good article. Thank you, The Guardian. How you guys doing? Is the chat still on? I haven't seen anything. Happy Wednesday. Escape from the rabbit hole. The conspiracy theorist who abandoned his dangerous beliefs. Dangerous. Why do they tell us why they're dangerous? No, they don't. Unfortunately, but just take the Guardian's word that thinking these things is dangerous. For 15 years, Brent Lee spent hours each day consuming truther content online. Then he logged off. Can he convince his former friends to question their worldview? What's up, Indigo? Shannon? Brent Lee struggles to explain why he used to believe that a cabal of evil satanic pedophiles was working to establish a new world order. He pauses, looks sheepish, and says, I cringe at it all this now. For 15 years, Lee collected signs that so-called Illuminati overlords were controlling global events. He convinced himself that secret societies were running politics, banks, religious institutions, and the entertainment industry, and that most terrorist attacks were actually government-organized ritual sacrifices. Wow. So I guess the game plan is, in this one, let's throw everything that's actually true in one thing, and we'll have this guy waking up realizing that everything he believed was false. It's kind of like elementary, really, but probably effective on many people, unfortunately. But not people that are in the know. Not people that are aware that this shit's going on. I don't care who you are. This could be like Nikola Tesla, for all account. Like, that's one of my idols, right? Idols. Somebody I look up to with his work is genius. Somebody that never got credit. Until way after his death, unfortunately. Sounds like a lot of people that were very important. Tends to be the case. So, it doesn't matter who says it. I do my own research. There's facts out there. You can see videos. You can see things. You can hear testimony. You can, there's actual facts that no matter what type of sly, slanderous voice covers it, it will not take away from the fact that the truth is the truth. You can't cover the truth in lies and no longer make it true. However, you can demolish lies, tons of lies, with one truth. I use this, you've probably heard this plenty of times coming out of my mouth, but you cannot go into a darkened or a lit room with a handful of darkness. Like here my hand is cupped, inside my hand's cupped, there's darkness in there. If I walk into a room that's well lit up or lit up at all and go like this, that darkness isn't going to go anywhere. It's not going to do anything to the light. That's like false versus fact. That's fiction versus fact. But you definitely can go into a dark room and take a little bit of truth or light, like take a lighter, flick it, and then all of the darkness, all of the lies dissipate. These are universal laws. You can never, you can get people to believe it through fancy words and propaganda. You can use people like Joseph Goebbels that know the ins and outs of how the mind works and try to work around these types of things, but it's not really what's happening. And they're just tricks of the mind to get you to believe falsehoods, things that you normally wouldn't. But when people are grounded and when people see both sides and they actually have a fair chance at them without being manipulated, which is what the media tries to constantly do, there is no way that the truth can't be believed. Right? Like when you see, when you know, the facts are there, that's all it takes. No amount of lies to sit there and tell you, well, I don't care what you've seen, heard, tasted, whatever. That's not what it was. Well, no, I'm pretty sure, my senses are, they would have to convince, it's gaslighting, right? They would have to convince you that you're insane. And that's kind of where we're going, I guess, with this, because this guy at one point believed all these things. Like, well, let's read it one more time. For 15 years, Lee collected signs that the so-called Illuminati overlords were controlling global events. He convinced himself that secret societies were running politics, banks, religious institutions, and the entertainment industry. Let's not forget that the Illuminati of Bavaria, that actual Illuminati, stated that they were out to control these very institutions. And that's a fact, right? So, yes, that was in 1776 with Adam Weishaupt. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he basically set this all in motion many, many years ago. Now, is it still going on? I guess we would have to look at the evidence to support it. But don't do that, because you'll end up like this guy, Brentley. He was also inclined to believe in UFOs and that Stanley Kubrick staged and directed the filming of the moon landing. He saw satanic symbols in the London 2012 Olympic opening ceremony and spent most of his time discussing these theories with an online community of fellow believers. You guys remember that 2012 Olympic opening ceremony? That was the one where they had those robed nurses that looked like death running around, and there was a bunch of children on these giant beds underneath the blankets, and they were reading and stuff, and then they would come with these syringes and rip the blankets off, and yeah, it was really a wonderful thing to watch. It's definitely related to Olympic sports. I can see why they did that. But in 2018, something shifted. Jay Krieg, good to see you. And he began to find the new wave of conspiracy theories increasingly implausible. What's the new wave of conspiracy theories? I mean, is that like just because the media keeps calling everything a conspiracy theory now? Is that the new wave of it, I guess? Like, I have no idea. This is hard to keep track of because everything is a conspiracy theory at this point. I was sick of it. I felt I can't deal with hearing this anymore because it is no longer what I believe. So I just logged off the internet. It's no longer what I believe. Why did you need to believe any of it? If this is a religion to people, then you're no better off than, I mean, what's there's a disconnect here. These so-called conspiracy theorists that the media and politics keep shining the light on oh so frequently, they seem to be really focused on the truth, right? And if you really are focused on the truth, then you let things like evidence guide you. You let facts guide you. You let your eyes and ears, your senses guide you. There's no need for belief, right? You could theorize for sure, like any good scientific study always starts off with a theory, but you only theorize so you can therefore test it afterwards and see if anything holds water. There's been many things I once thought was possibly true, only to find something that threw a wrench in those gears and was like, well, no, that's clearly not the case. So let's figure something else out and see if this is. Right? It's about getting to the bottom. And then once you find something that it seems to connect all the dots, and you've done your homework, you crossed your T's and dotted your I's, everything looks good, and there's nothing so far that you've seen that disproves or cancels any of it out, and it's far more plausible than any of the other things that are being suggested as the cause or the conclusion or whatever. If ever that is on the opposing side of the powerful, right? This cabal that they speak of that doesn't exist apparently. If it ever goes against their narrative, their agendas, that's when it's deemed a conspiracy theory, and that's when it's demonized, regardless of how much information is there to support it. This is such an interesting article. Every time I've gone through this so far, it's a psychological masterpiece because the simplicity of it, really, just somebody that was, right? And I've seen this before. I've covered these types of articles, but this one just stands out for some reason. It's like, oh, I used to believe in the truth. Is essentially what they're saying. I used to believe that there are powerful individuals that have grouped together many, many, many years ago, but that's besides the point, that have their own type of ideas of how the world should be, and they have the resources to accomplish that if they so choose to set out and do so. What's up, Pam? How you doing? Glad you could join. Appreciate you being here, of course. But no. Now we have somebody that apparently was in the know, that was like actually awake to seeing how these things boil down, because anybody who's really concerned about these types of stories, I guess, like these narratives, these news stories, whatever they are, this information. Hey, Kutz, glad you could join, brother. They're concerned with facts. So apparently this guy, Brent Lee, was really doing a pretty good job. I mean, he really nailed it in this paragraph, the summary of what he believed. He was on the right track. Like, that's what anybody will ultimately arrive at. That's a give me. Like, but no, he had an awakening. So, no, let's go on before I go there. Now Lee is trying to help other conspiracy theorists to question their worldview. So that's the goal in and of itself. That's the goal of this article. That's the goal of The Guardian. That's the goal of their puppet masters that are pulling the strings of these puppets that are producing this garbage. To help other conspiracy theorists to question their worldview. He will address a conference in Poland on disinformation, not misinformation, disinformation, meaning putting it out intentionally. And keep in mind the title was talking about danger. This is all leading in the same direction as everything else has that we cover all the time on this channel. Well, this video isn't, but amiable and articulate, Lee is disarmingly willing to admit that he got things spectacularly wrong. Not just wrong. He wasn't just wrong a little bit. All those things that we just heard about powerful people running the show. Let's go one more time. Overlords were controlling global events. That could never happen. Convinced himself that secret societies were running politics. Freemasons don't exist. Banks, they're nonsense. Religious institutions, of course not. The Pope talking about baptizing aliens, that should be in the Bible. And the entertainment industry, well, everybody doing their little pyramids and all-seeing eyes covering half their face up. That's normal. And the most terrorist attacks were actually government-organized ritual sacrifices. Sandy Hook happened the way they said it did. Those two people that ran off into the woods, the fact that Robbie Parker lost his daughter less than 24 hours and is laughing, saying, "Are we on?" and then starts crying immediately. That's how people are. And I could go on and on and on, like the Boston Marathon bomber and the people that were injured, like the guy in the wheelchair that was pushed about a mile, 3/4 of a mile with no legs, sat upright in a wheelchair. Let me tell you, if you got your legs blown off, the last thing you want to do is set somebody upright. You know why? Obviously, gravity. All the blood will go down. And if you have your major arteries, your two major arteries in your left leg and in your right leg severed, you're going to bleed out in seconds. But no, this guy was fine. He was fine the whole way down and afterwards. And don't pay attention to the fact that they were putting blood all over the cement and how they called this ahead of time, how there were snipers on the roofs and there were bomb-sniffing dogs, and they said, this is just a test. This goes without fail almost on almost all of the big psyops. Let's call them what they are, right? Not these terrorist attacks. Government organized ritual sacrifice. Yeah, probably. Like the 9/11 maybe. When you actually kill people, then it may be a ritual sacrifice. Other than that, it's just a psyop. It's a psychological operation used to control the minds of the masses. So he's trying to help us, this Lee. Spectacularly wrong, but it's still challenging to have a conversation with him about the abandoned belief system. Most of the theories seem so preposterous that the process of trying to understand them becomes exhausting. When I strain to follow the logic, he says, don't try to get me to make it make sense, because it doesn't. Oh, it doesn't make sense? So, what? Because from my experience, well, this is the thing, right? This is damage control. They're not trying to change your belief system. They're not trying to change mine. What they are doing is COVID, when that shit went down and they seen how tyrannical their government can be and all the crazy nonsense that went along, oh, you better take this experimental shot, literally experimental, you know that. Experimental, still in the experimental phase. You better take this with no known long-term side effect studies. And the studies that were done were very nefarious. What's up, Shulamite? Welcome, welcome, welcome. Glad you could join. And we are talking about a vaccine, correct? Do vaccines test for transmission or do they not? What is the point of a vaccine? I'm just curious, right? So I don't want to get too far off topic here. That usually gets me a strike. Matter of fact, let me just shut my mouth because I'm walking a fine line right there. His reasons for abandoning the truther movement. Truthers believe official accounts of big events are designed to conceal the truth from the public. You don't say. Are also hard to slot into a conventional worldview. Lee veers between feeling ashamed. He feels ashamed and amused. That's a interesting, like, I don't think I've ever felt ashamed and amused by my own anything, let alone my convictions, my integrity, what I believe. Like, oh, yeah, I guess I could see that. But when you're talking about something that's so blatantly obvious in the face, this isn't about us. They're not trying to change our minds. They're trying to change the minds of the people that, when they seen their governments operating in such a fashion, decided this shit's insane and started waking up and started doing their own research, and then ultimately arrived at the conclusion that the world is not what they thought. So what do? Damage control. And they've been putting out article after article. I can't keep up with it, right? I could do these types of videos all day, every day, showing how much they're trying to demonize people that are literally just looking for the truth. And by damn if they find it, then hope you don't share it, because if you do, you're going to be probably on a Department of Homeland Security list somewhere, or the FBI, because back in 2019, they decided to put conspiracy theorists at the top of their list as potential domestic terror threats. And it's only been followed since by domestic extremist definitions that say basically the exact same thing. People that believe that a group, a cabal, or anti-Semite, all of the things that are actually happening, if you call them out, if you see them for what they are, if you read between the lines and actually arrive at something that you can test and find out that, yes, this is accurate, and that's usually by video nowadays, right? There's so much proof out there. And if it goes against whatever garbage propaganda that they're feeding you, right? To take your guns or to do whatever it is that they want to do. If you're like, well, you said this, but it just doesn't add up. Just like, let's talk about David Hogg for just 1 second here. Now, we're supposed to believe David Hogg was a part of some major mass shooting, and he was hiding in a closet, and he was recording on his phone, and it was all that. But then there's that video about his biology partner when he was in high school, and they were all calling him out. He was like, why do I have to be paired with the 24-year-old? He's like, and basically called him out. He was new to the school, like the whole official narrative. This is just one example. I could do this for days, maybe even months. I could just go after example through PSYOP after PSYOP and be like, well, they said this, but we ultimately ended up finding out that this was the case. And even still, they will ultimately try to either completely dodge or double down. Like, yeah, because they hope that most people haven't seen that, and they're just like, no, those are liars. Those are conspiracy theorists. Those people that said what happened, like actual facts that happened, are still conspiracy theorists. And they're counting on the fact. That's what this article is essentially doing as well. Like I said, it's not us that they're concerned about. They're already well aware of who we are. It's the newbies, so to speak. It's the ones that have just witnessed a tyrannical takeover. Like they found out the masks have been lifted. This reminds me of that what was it, the Super Bowl commercial in 2020, 2021, 2019 even. It was a Maserati commercial, and it was like, we come out of the shadows and we strike. That whole commercial is very prophetic in a way, but it's not prophetic because it's exactly what they intended on doing. Jen, yeah, it's been a while. Good to see you. I thought you, I don't know, I thought you just hated watching live streams. A 2020 poll found that 17% of Americans, but that number's low because it's far higher than that. A 2020 poll, oh, in 2020 that may be the case. If you did a 2023 poll, you're looking at like 34%. That'd be my guess. You're looking at double the number of Americans believe the group of Satan worshiping elites who run a child bleep ring are trying to control our politics and media. All right, guys. I've spent enough time on this. I wanted to go through the whole thing, but I got too much to cover. I want to run through this. This is October 4th. I feel like this is going to be like an annual thing. I don't know why, but I feel as though October 4th may be an annual thing, not a test every October 4th. I'm just saying we may look back on this day, not in a celebratory fashion, but we may remember, and whether it calls for a moment of silence or a celebration, I guess the future will hold and let us know how we should behave in the future. But for now, today, these damn conspiracy theorists fear emergency alert systems will turn the jabbed into zombies. How many people shut off their phones? How many people shut off their TVs today? Honestly. None of you? All of you? Nobody? Anyone? Did you guys get the Fema alert? Mic check, 1, 2. Yeah, I shut my phone off too. Sorry, I was thinking that YouTube might have pulled one of their tricks. So the alarm did go off for you, Jen. You didn't get jabbed, so probably nothing to worry about. I took precautions anyway, just because I don't know, right? I don't know. I know there's shedding. That's to be expected. There's always going to be those people. Yeah, and if that's your daughter, then maybe you need to talk to her more about why it's not. You don't have a cell anymore? That's awesome. I don't know how I would manage without one, unfortunately, and that's a sad thing to say. Conservative conspiracy theorists are apparently convinced that an upcoming emergency broadcast is going to turn everyone with a COVID-19 jab into zombies. No. That some people are saying that, but like the way that people are talking about this and the way that the mainstream media portrays it are so disconnected. Like nobody's thinking that there's just like, well, maybe there are. I hope not, but I'm sure there's some dumbasses out there that as soon as they think that the single goes off, they're gonna be like, yeah, I need brains. It's not how any like those aren't people that are concerned with the truth, right? Because if they were, then they would follow people that would bring the best case of truth their way that they could find. And clearly, I mean, do people just want to believe stuff? Is there any truth to? I doubt it. I couldn't see how there would be. Because from my experience interacting with people, they don't, at least people in this so-called truther community, they know better. They know what is, they may not know the exact science, but they're well aware that there is something that has been introduced to the body. Can only imagine how that got there. But that could be activated. Guys, this is it. This is what I was talking about for years, right? And that's kind of the premise of what this October 4th thing is. Now, whether or not that signal, that frequency can actually do that, that's what we need to find out, right? So right now, it is a theory and people are conspiring. So technically, this is a conspiracy theory. Now, the reason we entertain these types of things, regardless of the connotation, is because people want to know what's really going on. They know that this unnecessary, like, why else would the entire world politician class all of a sudden in lockstep be demanding that you get an experimental jab? Like, that goes against all everything that the Hippocratic Oath stands for with informed consent, right? You're talking about a jab that has a complete blank white piece of paper. That's not informed consent. The doctors weren't able to provide it. It was in its test phase. The only reason it was able to make it as far as it did inside people's arms was because of the emergency authorization. What's up, New Edge? Good to see you, man. So, how is it that the entire world all of a sudden starts demanding that their citizens take this or else face the consequences of starving your family to death? Potentially ending up in a quarantine center like in Australia. So clearly, whatever it was so damn important. And then there's people like myself who start looking into these things. Who is Moderna? Who is Pfizer? Who are the people that created these technologies that are being utilized? And what did they spend their entire lives doing? Patent after patent after patent. And we covered them. We went through them. We showed the work. Now, anybody who does that would also see that this is an extremely, got to be careful here, extremely potentially nefarious situation that we're dealing with, right? Like, maybe the government of the world don't have our best interests in mind. Maybe they're really not out to help us. And they're actually out to enslave us and control us and depopulate us. That would make sense when you start looking at what these technologies are capable of doing. But it certainly doesn't make sense that they would use these types of technologies to fight off the common cold or SARS-CoV. Let me jump ahead and we'll jump back. We're gonna move around a little bit here, but good old Robert Langer, founder of Moderna.
Prof. Langer is joining us virtually and will share about just showed you, and then like what's called an ionizable lipid. But when we started, very few lipids. Copeland and myself ever that you can to many, many products, some of which dollar companies. I was so excited. They gave me grants and they were, giant companies. And I thought, gee, something I did might help people someday. But, they worked on it maybe for a year and they just gave up. And then one of my colleagues, Alex Klevenoff, said to me one day, Bob, said, we should start our own company. So we started this little company, Enzotech, which later merged to become Alchemies. And we also started other companies and also licensed things to different companies. And that has led to many, many products, some of which are shown on the next slide. And there are all kinds of things that you can inject into the body that can treat cancer, heart disease, schizophrenia, type 2 diabetes, even like what are called drug-eluting stents, which is in the bottom right, which is one of the major treatments for heart disease. So hundreds of millions of people now use these every year. But going back to the academic lab, I could still see that there were lots of issues to solve. When we made most of these that you're just seeing here are like microspheres or implants. As we make things smaller and smaller, you could get release like we showed in that Nature paper. But sometimes what would happen is the little particles, like the nanoparticles, they'd stick together and aggregate. And also they could get eaten by macrophages. So we had this idea, next slide, of making a special coating. We did this with Vladimir Torchelin and others. And
notice, coating nanoparticles with polyethylene glycol. Now, it just so happens, fact, YouTube, that polyethylene glycol is one of the ingredients in both Pfizer and Moderna's mRNA vaccine. Maybe that's related, maybe it's not.
And called polyethylene glycol. This will end up being one of the 4 key components in all lipid nanoparticles. But now, this is almost 30 years ago. So we published this in Science.
Why is that, guys? Why do they need polyethylene glycol? Well, we're going to find out throughout the rest of this live stream. And for those that may not remember my Charles Lieber playlist, what I am going to present is absolutely 100% fact. These are not conspiracy theories. These are not hypotheticals. These are facts that I'm going to, from here on out, be presenting you. And then I want you to just, the hypothetical in lies with this. Consider that there may be an actual reason that they did all of the things that they did. As far as creating the nanotechnologies and who and what companies did that, who funded it, like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, CEPI, Gavi, and many others. And at the same time, realize that there is a clear and present push moving us into this so-called fourth industrial revolution that Klaus Schwab has written an entire book about, with transhumanism at its head.
Science. And let me just show you a little bit of data. The next slide shows some atomic force micrographs. The next slide just shows you that they really are nanoparticles. Next slide. The next slide is quasi-elastic light scattering. And what's really exciting is shown on the next slide. That when you put an orange dye in them and you have a macrophage, if you don't have PEG, look on the upper left. They're all eaten. They're all in the cell within an hour. But when we coat them with...
This is important right here.
PEG, they're hardly taken up at all. And there are different designs we use. So that was very exciting. And then we thought,
So what does that do? Yeah, I fought it, and I won. I was glad that they finally did give me the strike, because then I was able to appeal it. However, I'm still waiting for my video to magically reappear. Polyethylene glycol. What he just said, this is worth watching this video a couple of times, guys. I'll leave links. Hopefully the links stay up. My descriptions disappear sometimes after I put them up, which is typical of the type of things that we have to deal with over here. But I'll definitely leave links for this whole video. This whole video, because each one of these are important. I love the intro because it's such a beautiful way to show you guys get it. I don't need to spend 20 minutes trying to explain that. But as far as factual information and things that are actually important and concerning, dealing with frequencies being generated by Fema, it's worth taking your time and going through them at length, because I could not possibly, in the amount of time allotted, whatever that is, not nearly enough. So take your own time and go through them and listen closely to what he's saying, because polyethylene glycol does also a very important thing, and that is bypassing the blood-brain barrier. And as far as I'm concerned, that's what they're concerned about. It's about not being removed from the body through inflammatory responses. It's about going to the necessary organs or brain neurons that they desire without being destroyed. It's extremely important. Robert Linger, founder of Moderna, is telling us.
Well, we could even do targeting. And the next slide is sort of that idea.
What's that look
and
like?
Farrakhan did a lot of that. And I'm, by the way, sometimes I feel I don't explain this that well. So I want to show you a video on the next slide that Nova, the TV show, did. If we could turn on that next slide in video.
He starts with a nanoparticle of anti-cancer drug. That gets encased in a plastic that releases the drug over time. That, in turn, gets a special wrapping that disguises the package as a water molecule to fool the body's immune system.
This should be second nature to you guys by now. I can't count the amount of times I've described this exact process.
And last but not least, the address where it should be delivered. A key that will only fit the lock of cancer cells.
Not just cancer cells. They're talking specific mRNA delivery, right? That could be anything. What you need to do is you need to find whatever genetic sequence that you want to bind to. You need this isn't a problem for them at all. They can deliver this anywhere that they want, and the brain seems to be, by the funding, the resources, the research, what it is that they're really concerned about. And that may be at first, like I said, guys, from the very beginning, this isn't about, I mean, it is about first and foremost depopulation, but that game is a slow unfolding through many different mechanisms. But for the people that remain, they need to know what you're thinking. And not just be able to read. Because as these patents show that we've gone over and will continue to go over because they're so very important, is that they're sending and receiving. They're reading and writing. Meaning not only do they have the capability of, once that these technologies, these nanolipids with the polyethylene glycol have bypassed the blood-brain barrier and set up shop at an individual neuron level that we have seen them say, not me, meaning a whole entire 100% readout of the brain. Now, with a sophisticated enough algorithm, with a smart enough AI, which we have and we've had for about a year and a half now, publicly anyway, it's nothing to start mapping out what people are thinking and what this does. That's what it does. That's how neural networks operate to begin with. So a neural network operating to find out how neural pathways function is like a no-brainer for this AI. I'm inclined to believe that if anything were set out today, it would be exactly what I have been warning about for 3 years. That there will be a signal, there will be a frequency of some sort that will ultimately cause the release of these buckyballs, right? That, like we just seen. Let's go back 10 seconds.
Now, I should tell you that all the clinicians...
So I'm going to have to go back a little further.
That, and Omid Farrakhan did a lot of that. And I'm, by the way, sometimes I feel I don't explain this that well, so I want to show you a video on the next slide that Nova, the TV show, did. If we could turn on that next slide in video.
He starts with a nanoparticle of anti-cancer drug. That gets encased in a plastic that releases the drug over...
So it doesn't have to be an anti-cancer drug. It can literally be anything. Now, what we did see, which was interesting, in this mRNA patent, there were genetic sequences of things like Ebola. Oh, let me clarify. That's incorrect. This is my opinion, YouTube. I believe I remember seeing some crazy lunatic out there that should never be believed at any cost, yada, 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 say something like that. Anything could be in here. And they also said something ridiculous like this jab, the genetic sequences that were in it had things like Ebola, Marburg, Nipah, HIV. How outlandish, of course. We would never consider that any of that could possibly be true, would we? So that could be, according to these psychopathic, nonsensical, retarded people that don't know, whatever I gotta say. Could be anything. Now, there's something called recombinant viruses, which so what you see on the right hand of your screen right there, right? Let's just throw a hypothetical scenario out there. You could have half of the genetic sequence of Ebola. Half. Actually, you could have 99%, for that matter, of Ebola. But it doesn't matter for two reasons. One, it's encapsulated in a buckyball and in a nanotechnology that has been designed to keep it there. And two, it's missing the E1 gene, which allows for replication inside of a human body. So, all's well. However, there could be another buckyball right beside it that is encapsulated with a lipid nanoparticle, or however they want to explain it, but polyethylene glycol and all these other things that are able to do what it is that they set out to do and target, like he said, Robert Langer, the founder of Moderna, target whatever it is that they want to target. Right next to it, you could have, theoretically, of course, an E1 gene. So that's fine. We got these two closed balls. They could bump into each other. You live your life day to day. Everything's fine. Even though you have Ebola inside of you, hypothetically speaking. You have it inside of you. That's not a problem. It's all good. But the reason this is remote targeted delivery is because through electromagnetic frequencies, this lipid nanolayer, this polyethylene glycol, one or the other, depending on which jab we're talking about. If this were to ever be the case, according to these nut jobs that we would never listen to, yada, yada, yada. If this electromagnetic frequency happens to hit a certain pitch, a certain frequency that melts away, essentially, hits it where molecule by molecule, it breaks it down till it ultimately arrives at the center. So the way a recombinant virus works, because a virus isn't a living thing, but it's not a dead thing. It's a very peculiar thing that can recombine given the right circumstances. And the right circumstances would be you have almost the entire genome, and you also have the gene that can reproduce it. And all of a sudden, those outer shells are melted away or broken open. And now they're doing what they do. The 99% Ebola would hijack the cell and start incorporating its genome into the nucleus so it can replicate. However, it wouldn't be able to replicate previously or prior. But now that both of these things have been opened, the E1 gene is also there. So the genetic sequence may make its way through one of the cells that is operating with that genetic code that has hijacked the nucleus and has 99% of the code but can't reproduce. All of a sudden, here comes that other one that has now been released and has the E1 gene, making a complete recombinant virus and allowing the cell to reproduce the virus in totality. Now, this doesn't necessarily need to be a virus. This can be done in a lot of different things. Like we're talking about genetic engineering as well in a situation like this. You could pass on genes to people. You can do this. You can give all the puzzle. It's like, think of it this way. It's like you have a syringe and you have a 5-piece puzzle. We're going to super simplify things. And somebody injects that 5-piece puzzle into your body. Now, all of these parts are floating around, but nobody even knows that they're even puzzle pieces yet because they're encapsulated in gerbil balls, like hamster wheel, like those little plastic balls. They're like blackened out. They're just like little balls and nobody knows what's in them, and they're floating around your body. Or we could do magnets, however your mind wants to think of this, right? Like little magnets that aren't magnetic because they're inside of this ball, but once they're together, they form a bigger magnet. I don't know how to. I'm just doing my best to explain this to you so you understand the technology that we're discussing here. So once a certain frequency, remotely, of course, is generated, these balls open up. And then there's these puzzle pieces. Now, we didn't know that these were puzzle pieces until these balls opened up, but once they're there, your body automatically knows. Your body's a puzzle piece master. Your body's always putting puzzles together. So your body sees these puzzle pieces and it's like, holy shit, these little balls have been swimming around for the last 2.5 years. I had no idea they were puzzle pieces. Let me start putting them together. And it does. Now, we don't know what the picture is. I'm sure we will find out. But the thing is, is there could be numerous puzzles. Nanotechnology is so incredibly small. We're talking 100 thousandths, 10 to 100 thousandths the width of a piece of paper. You could, in just one injection, allow for countless puzzles, depending on their frequencies, depending on which balls want to be released. Some balls are released at different frequencies than other balls. And over time, now you have a mechanism that ultimately does everything you could possibly ever want it to. You could, one, we know about monitoring the neuronal pathways and the synapses and the firings between them to map out the entire human brain so we know what they're thinking. But if you ever want, hypothetically, to have another pandemic, then whoever's the creator of these technologies has the wavelengths that are necessary to open these balls. Not just all the balls, but specific balls. I want to open the Marburg balls today. But I only want to do it in this area of Manhattan. So all it takes is that 5G tower to send out, it needs to be microwave, right? It needs to be a 5G tower, coincidentally. Because that's what range we're talking about here. For the most part. Not concretely, but for the most part. So, got to make it look legit, right? Because, well, people get people sick, is what we're told. So, if Manhattan gets it, well then, let's wait 5 to 10 days, and then let's hit Brooklyn. Let's hit them 5G towers and release those same exact Marburg balls. And now other people their bodies start putting these puzzle pieces together. And they got and all of a sudden their body, and they have these recombinant viruses, but as far as the outside's concerned, they just have the virus. Tested. Like that, it's 100%. It doesn't matter if it's recombined or not. It's what it is. And you could put it all in there at once. In one shot. If you forgot something, give them a booster. You want to get more technology in there, give them another one. Hypothetically speaking.
Over time, that in turn gets a special wrapping that disguises the package as a water molecule to fool the body's immune system. And last but not least, the address where it should be delivered, a key that will only fit the lock of cancer cells.
Now, I should tell you that all the clinicians I work with tell me it doesn't blow the cell up quite like that. But at any rate, so that's what we thought about. And then we also, with Dan Anderson,
that's what I was just saying, Robert Linger. I'm glad we're on the same page here, buddy.
who was one of my postdocs, decided to do work on the fourth component. Like there's 4 components in lipid nanoparticles: cholesterol, structural lipid, now a PEG lipid because in part of what I just showed you, and then like what's called an ionizable lipid. But when we started, there were very few lipids that people used. So we came up really with the first ways of doing what I'll call combinatorial synthesis of lipids, where we could make thousands of them. And this was the wish list shown here, that you could do it in a single step. And part of what we did is use certain types of chemistry, illustrated on the next slide, like a Michael addition. And by doing that, you could react.
Thanks, Charles Lieber.
Diamines, and basically you could make lipid-like materials, and you could get enormous chemical diversity by changing the R group. And the next slide or two will show you that. The next slide just shows large variation in the R group, and you can also change the tails and number of tails, as shown in the next slide.
And this allows them to bind when they're talking about the key, this allows them to bind to different cells, to different things that they want to attach to. Now, I'm not going to play too much of this. I don't want to overload people that may be somewhat unfamiliar with this type of stuff. There's other stuff to go through that is kind of just as overwhelming. But this is what we're dealing with, guys. This is why these so-called conspiracy theorists out there are talking about these types of things. Because it's not that this is just some fanciful, imaginative thing. It's that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has funded MIT and Harvard, Charles Lieber and Robert Langer in the development, among many others. These are the two I focus on because these two are like literally that's who we should focus on. But there's a plethora of other ones that have just as good, if not even better, technologies, but they all do the same. The reason I focus on these is because these are the guys at the center of this all. Like Charles Lieber was arrested. He was working for DARPA. He was arrested at the very, very beginning before COVID was even COVID for working at the Wuhan lab of virology. And what was he working on? What were his patents? And what did he do with Robert Langer? And why were these two working on cyborg flesh technology? And it goes, I mean, you couldn't create a sci-fi movie that is insane as the reality in which we are living in.
Next slide. And so you get enormous diversity. So we literally made thousands of tiny little lipid nanoparticles. And on the next slide, this is all work we did in collaboration with El Nilam, with Akina Kink, who was one of my students, but then went there to lead their program on rare diseases for ATTR amyloidosis. So you can get a dose response curve. You can get this is factor 7 in vivo, but the next slide shows you get a dose response curve. As you increase the amounts, you get more and more knockdown.
All right, moving on. Non-invasive, remote-controlled nanomedicine by using electric field stimulation for in vivo, in-body effective cancer therapy. Now, cancer, they always want to wrap these technologies up in a pretty package and bow. That's how they get their funding, right? You can't sell that to the public. You can't sell that and be like, hey, we really have this in mind. You know what this in mind means, right? This is what we really want to do, but we can't tell the public that. We can't write that as the reason we're asking for this money. So we're going to try to cure cancer. We're going to try to cure Parkinson's. Those are the two that are always used. Parkinson's is because of the brain, right? And Alzheimer's as well we see a lot of. But it's because they're messing with neurons. They're messing with the brain. And the reason they're doing this is for the reason that I just stated a moment ago, is they want a readout. And not only do they want to read out, more importantly, they want to write. And this technology gives them all that. And we haven't even touched the graphene stuff yet. Well, let's touch the graphene stuff. Graphene nanomaterials based radio frequency microwave biosensors for biomaterial detection. What's biomaterial? Your brain. Graphene nanomaterials based radio frequency microwave. You're talking about your phone. You're talking about your TV. You're talking about anything that's got a signal. RF. In this paper, the advances in radio frequency microwave biosensors based on graphene nanomaterials, including graphene, graphene oxide, and reduced graphene oxide, are reviewed. From a few frontier studies, recently developed graphene nanomaterials based RF microwave biosensors are examined in depth and discussed. Finally, the prospects and challenges of next generation radio frequency microwave biosensors for wireless biomedical applications are proposed. Thanks, Jen. Introduction. Graphene is a carbon allotrope consisting of an atomically thin 2D hexagonal lattice. This thin material can be regarded as the fundamental building block for the other carbon allotropes. Three-dimensional graphite, one-dimensional carbon nanotubes, and zero-dimensional fullerenes. Fullerenes are the buckyballs. These buckyballs are what encapsulate the genetic sequences that may or may not be swimming around in people's bodies. That buckyball is encapsulated in a lipid nanoparticle or a polyethylene glycol. Those can be dissolved essentially with certain frequencies, certain pulses. Then it exposes the fullerene, the buckyball. That buckyball can then do a combination of things depending on what it's been programmed to do through DNA programming. Guys, this technology is so involved and so in depth, but it's really not like it's hard for me to hold back. It's like I want to go down these tangents and just start like telling. It would just take way too long. That's why I created not one but two Charles Lieber playlists. The first one I believe had 13, and the second one had like 27 or some shit. It was a bunch because I wanted to start off with, and it wasn't just about Charles Lieber. The reason I made it about Charles Lieber is because it's really his technology. Him and Robert Langer. These guys are like the godfathers of nanotechnology. Robert Langer is more biology centered, and Charles Lieber is more technology centered. And of course, the two would meet. And the first time that they did so, they worked on a project called Cyborg Flesh Technology. And what this technology allowed for was the introduction of like an encyclopedia of information in the body. And not just, I don't even know how to explain this properly in such short time. It allows for, I mean, on its surface, what it allowed for was just petri dish flesh that was wired up with nanowires, right? But that wasn't the point, because that petri dish consisted of real DNA, real flesh. What the point of it was to show that these technologies, these nanowires, when I say you're being wired up from the inside, I mean exactly that. Now, it's not a wire like you think like of a copper wire. It's more of a parallel nervous system. And what this nervous system ultimately does is it isn't beholden to you like your nervous system is. It is beholden to whoever can read that information. But they can only read that information if they can have access to it. Now, how do they do that, right? How can they possibly, how does your body give signals out that can be read? It can do this through these technologies, through this graphene and the graphene oxide and the reduced graphene. This is how your body becomes the computer in which they want it to be. All the other things are gravy. It's frosting. It's cake. It's extra. It just amazes me that hypothetically, in one shot, take that how you will, they could achieve so many different things, allowing them essentially to have 110% control over your bodily functions, all of them. Because I don't have time to get into it. I feel like this is the beginning of another playlist. I'm not sure what I'll call it, but I think it's important. I think October 4th is important. But it is, without me having the time to run through those many different technologies that allow for this. What you essentially can do in one shot is allow all of the things that you could possibly ever want as far as depopulation is concerned, making it look natural, of course, all by the flick of a switch, all by turning the dial, by releasing the lipid nanoparticle or the polyethylene glycol, exposing what's in the buckyball, shattering that ball, joining and recombining whatever virus necessary. But if not that, then also, because like we also heard, you can target specific organ, not even organs. They remember the key Robert Langer was talking about, the key. This has already been done at an individual neuron level. Like I said earlier, that literally means a complete brain. That means they can map out your entire brain. And with this will probably be my next video talking more about graphene. And for anybody interested, there's an argument to be made. Now, of course, I don't buy this for a second. This is hate speech. This is disinfo. This is boo, right? COVID jabs based on graphene, nano network, and Internet of Nano Things. By happenstance, I came across this Kira Smith, who had worked on... We'll also talk about that. Some of you may remember a little bit. But she's in the military. And this stuff wasn't supposed to be released to the public. But courtesy of yours truly and a little knockoff of a group called DeadSec, this was published. It wasn't even published. The restrictions were removed. And then it became public. And I would like to think that this channel, well, not this channel, but the previous channel, was the first to show this. But this is military research right here. It is now practically established that the element graphene, a derivative of graphite and based on carbon-forming nanotubes, is present in serum, in addition to the presence of other materials derived from it, such as graphene oxide. Graphene is a nanomaterial that possesses exceptional physical, thermodynamic, electronic, mechanical, and magnetic properties. It can be used as a superconductor, transducer, absorber of electromagnetic waves, emitter and receiver of signals. This is also a Robert O. Young study, by the way, for anybody interested. It has also been observed that by taking a vial of Pfizer jab and allowing the hydrogel to dry after 3 to 4 days. Now, keep in mind, obviously, this is complete bogus. I would never trust anybody that works for the government. Like, I don't know what to... You know what I'm doing here, right? Like, I'm trying to convince you guys that this is saving my... this is misinformation, of course, right? We know that the jabs are safe and effective. They're clearly safe and effective. I've never heard of one case of anybody getting hurt. So, anytime I read something like this, I just automatically think like, oh my God, look at these conspiracy theorists trying to destroy humanity with this information. After 3 to 4 days, the presence of nanocircuits can be seen under the microscope. It is the graphene that reacts to electromagnetic fields and electromagnetic microwaves, self-assembles according to DNA-based nanopatterns to mark the order of construction, and electrophoresis and Teslaphoresis to trigger the process in the solution material, hydrogel, into electronic nanocircuits with real nanoscale components, such as a nanorouter nano, etc. Well, I'm curious what the etc. is because both nano router and nano and teto, when we're talking about inside the body, is pretty damn alarming. So anything on top of that, I would love to know so I can continue my research. But formed of graphene, which acts as a signal repeater, since it is a radio modulable, i.e., able to absorb electromagnetic waves, and multiply their radiation. These electronic components are organized in quantum dots. Quantum dot technology sound familiar to anybody? It should if you remember. Depends on how long you've been with me, really. Guys, I've been warning about this for like a decade. I've been talking about all of this stuff before it was even before COVID. Doing my best, trying to reach as many people. And at one point early on, I was able to actually like reach people. We had a growing channel. We had thousands and thousands of subscribers. But then, as the time drew near, right, where they needed people like you and I to shut up, then that's exactly what they started doing. They started increasing the types of articles that we started this live stream off with. Like, oh, I forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I once was a conspiracy theorist, and I have steered far from my ways. Guys, I got to get wrapping it up. I'm just getting started. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Share it, get it out there. For anybody like that thought that for some bizarre reason that there may be like instantaneous effects or something that no, this stuff takes time. And I don't think we're even at like the depopulation thing is something that is a great they got 5 years. They got 5 more years. They don't want everybody to drop dead at once. You know how you couldn't do that. People would be like, "Oh hell no," and then they would be there at the door, pitchforks. You got to do a lot of different things, and you got to make sure that the people that survive are completely controllable. And in order to do this, it has to look natural. It has to look like, oh, this Ebola is starting over here, and they'll use climate change, right? They'll use new viruses or new things that we've never seen before. They'll talk about like, oh, the ice is melting. We discovered a 10,000-year-old virus that is blah 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 blah. And then all they got to do is hit the switch. We need to be aware of this type of stuff, and other people need to as well. I appreciate all the support I get from you guys. Thank you so much. Um, I'll keep bringing it to you. Just do what you can to get it out there. We finally hit 100 subscribers. That's amazing. I never thought I would think that 100 subscribers was amazing, but dealing with what we have to deal with now, like even after like of course, after thousands of subscribers, 100 meant, it wasn't a big deal. I have never been so proud in my entire life to reach 100 subscribers. It's a milestone. But let's make it 200. And then let's make it 1,000. And then let's make it 10, and then we're going to start doing things. But we got to prove that we can before you got to walk before you or crawl before you walk. I don't know. We got to definitely prove that it's possible. At least I do to myself, I think. Because I don't know why I'm still here on YouTube. Other than I'm told to. I hope you guys have a great night. I really do hope your day tomorrow is excellent. Like, it'd be awesome for you. Like, if you just started your day perfectly. Like, the coffee maker went off on time. You poured it, and it tasted delicious. And then on your way to work, you stopped in, to grab whatever it is you grabbed. And you bought a lottery ticket for some reason, and then bam, you won. And then when you got to work, you were like given a raise. And if not, none of that stuff happens, hopefully it's sunny. Hopefully you see your kids smile. hopefully your grandson, whatever the case may be, those little things are so very important, and never take them for granted, especially in the last days. God bless you guys. Much love.